Welcome in, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
This is Everything Sucks, Let's Fix It, episode 38. My name is Ben Mayer.
My name is Anthony Buono.
Today is March 20th, 2024. As you might have noticed, it's been a while since we came out with a new episode.
Yeah, Ben has been a selfish little guy, and he went all the way over to Italy for 2 weeks, so we couldn't catch you up on the news.
Yeah, despite my importance in the media landscape, I took some time off. But now we get to come back at it. Very excited.
Very excited.
Lots of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to skip over the last 3 weeks of what we've missed here.
Yep.
But main thing you got to know, Donald Trump is now officially the Republican nominee.
Shocker.
Shocker, right?
Yeah.
Who would have thought? Mm-hmm. Nikki Haley has dropped out, but notably, she has not endorsed presidential nominee Trump, which is very important. Nikki Haley got a lot of votes in a lot of states, and she is not throwing her weight behind Donald Trump all the way yet.
And it's been some time now since she dropped out, right? Super Tuesday was on March 5th, so we're over 2 weeks out, and she still hasn't endorsed him. That's important.
And from my understanding, the Trump campaign has not made any efforts to reach out to her.
Yeah.
There's not been reports of the Trump campaign trying to nurture them back into the conservative movement. They're mad and they're jaded, and they don't like what she did by staying in the race for so long. You know, they look at Meatball Ron, you know, and Trump just still buries Meatball Ron every chance he gets, and it's so depressing.
Yeah.
You know? So Nikki Haley probably sees no benefit in it for herself. She's like, even if I bend the knee, it's not like he's going to change anything about his view of me. That's how I think.
I think it's a decent political move from her, right? Like, she's like, if there's any remnants of the old Republican Party left, and if Trump loses this election and going forward, they still think they need another path to try to win a presidency, right? She set herself up. She is that person.
Yeah. And listen, now she has a lot of leverage over Joe Biden too. Not just leverage over Donald Trump, right? Because Joe Biden, if I was him and I was running his campaign, I would call her up the day after she dropped out. I'd be like, come to the White House, give a speech about how important aid to Ukraine is. Let's talk about something we agree on. Let's try to bring her into the fold. So the Nikki Haley voters are going to be a bit of a kingmaker in the election. That's how I view it. Right?
Yeah. I see it that way too.
So each side has to pick. Now, just because the presidential nominee for the Republican Party has been chosen, that doesn't mean that all Republican primaries are set in stone. These are still very important races going on around the country that is going to define what it means to be a Republican in the years to come. And so one state that had a very important, very relevant primary recently was North Carolina. Now, North Carolina was between three somewhat major candidates. Really, there was only one major candidate for this governor race for the Republican primary. It was Mark Robinson at the top, Dale Folwell, and Bill Graham. Now, Mark Robinson ended up winning 66% of the vote. Folwell got 18.5. Total decimation.
Completely wiped him out.
Decimation.
Yeah.
Now, Mark Robinson is the current lieutenant governor of North Carolina, but Mark Robinson carries a lot of baggage, and he is on the furthest right end of the Republican Party that you can be.
Yeah.
We have to really make it clear here. There really isn't much room to go further right than Mark Robinson.
No, he said something. I was reading a quote from him about saying separation of church and state doesn't exist. I checked the Constitution. I checked all of these documents. It's not anywhere. Because there is no separation of church and state.
God, that's a nightmare. That's so like, if that gets on the airwaves in every commercial break, normal people are going to look at that and be like, that's fucking weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess. But I mean, how many people in North Carolina are evangelical Protestants, right?
No, there is a huge evangelical Protestant movement in North Carolina. That's for sure.
And as a slight tangent, I will say I looked into where separation of church and state is from, and the actual wording doesn't come up anywhere until a speech in like the mid 1800s. But the idea is from I think a Thomas Jefferson speech that he gave when he was president about how the First Amendment implied government should not be involved in the affairs of religion and thus vice versa.
There you
Just
go.
to clear that up.
Yeah, so Mark Robinson, when you watch this show and learn that, stop saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't wait till he quotes me on that.
I know. I want to run down some things about Mark Robinson, some of his more famous one-liners that I've been able to do some opposition research on him on. Robinson said last month that he would absolutely protect life from conception. We got it down to 12 weeks, he said. The next goal is to get it down to 6 and then just keep moving from there. So, okay, just blatantly no abortion in the state of North Carolina. He totally wants to rid it out of the state. That's his explicit stated goal. So if there's any part of you that believes that a woman should have full control over her body and bodily autonomy, Mark Robinson just is not cohesive to that at all.
Yeah, not to mention if you are a woman who is worried about getting pregnant when you don't want to. This is something that will have a extremely distinct, specific effect on your life.
He also says he's like wants to go back in time to when women couldn't vote, which is a whole other thing. It's a whole, because he's like America was better when women couldn't vote. So we don't know if it means like it was better because women couldn't vote, or just saying that America was better when women couldn't vote.
Love that. Fantastic.
Love that. He's also described COVID-19 as a globalist conspiracy to destroy Donald Trump, which is just a classic. I feel like
that is a deep right-wing conspiracy.
Right? That's like when you start getting deep in it.
Yeah.
You know, that's no longer just like the base level stuff. You're like the Fed is a problem. You're going like
you're going to like .net blogs at that point, right?
You're like 2 steps away from QAnon, right? So he has said, referring to transgender and homosexual people, he's referred to them as filth. He has also said people who are gay are equivalent to what the cows leave behind, as well as maggots and flies. So this is like some of the most hateful rhetoric I've seen out of a major party candidate since Donald Trump. No, I'm kidding. But like, this is way worse than Donald Trump.
Way worse.
No, this is way worse.
Like,
than
let's
Trump.
be fair to Trump.
Yeah, be fair.
This is way worse.
Way worse. Yeah. Donald Trump has actually said that this guy is a better orator than Martin Luther King.
I believe you. Hasn't he? He also has criticized black people as like wanting to promote the violence that has kept them like behind the rest of society for so long.
Christ.
Yeah.
So like, we're looking at this. Republicans, what are you doing? Like, the people at the head of the Republican Party must be so mad about who their base is, because they must just be like, why are you picking these losers? Like McConnell, right? Must be, who is stepping down, by the way. But McConnell must be just sitting in his office every day being like, what the hell happened to all of us?
I don't know. Do you think they, I mean, we have evidence that Mitt Romney does care somewhat about this. I think McConnell might not. I think there's a fair share of them that might just be like, hey, we're all on this one side.
Yeah.
Let's pump up this side as much as we can.
Listen, that makes sense. Mitch McConnell did come out and he endorsed Donald Trump right away.
Yep.
The day after. He was like, nope, Donald Trump, you're my man.
Exactly. Even though he's condemned him in the past, especially after January 6th.
Even though he literally said that the criminal court process was where he needed to be punished for January 6th in regards to Trump. He's like, nope, he's the nominee. I support him.
Yeah.
Wild. But I want to go into where the polls are looking in North Carolina, because there's some interesting results coming out. So, as we know, Joe Biden has been trailing Donald Trump in the national polls for a while. Recently, it's starting to become more even-tied, right? In North Carolina, though, the polls generally have Biden down 2, down 3, down 4.
Okay.
But in all of these polls, Robinson is losing. So, in the same poll that has that has Donald Trump beating Joe Biden 51-48, the Democrat Josh Stein leads Robinson 49-47. So there's a good portion of Trump voters that are saying, nope, Robinson's too much for me. I'm going Josh Stein.
That's crazy.
Right?
And I would say this is with the context of when we usually see these polls, we see the down ballot Democrats doing better than Biden.
We always see that. Honestly, in every poll I can think of, it's been down ballot Democrat do better than Biden.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I'm thinking about Bob Casey in Pennsylvania. I'm thinking about Rosen over in Nevada. All these guys are doing better than Biden. Gallego in Arizona. So what I really want to get at here is Robinson is Doug Mastriano of 2022. Okay? Who's Doug Mastriano? Doug Mastriano was the Republican nominee for Pennsylvania governor in 2022. He was a train wreck. He was a big January 6th guy. He was the hardest right option out of the slew of candidates that ran for governor of Pennsylvania, and he ended up winning the primary because of Trump's endorsement. And when push came to shove, and Pennsylvania's a swing state. When push came to shove, Pennsylvania selected Josh Shapiro with 56% of the vote, Doug Mastriano 41%. Josh Shapiro won by 15 points against Doug Mastriano. In 2022, which is supposed to be the Republican wave year. This is what happens when you nominate crazy people. And we've said this on the show before. candidates matter.
Mm-hmm.
Candidates matter. And
Yes.
if you keep picking bad candidates, if you keep picking Doug Mastrianos,
You pay for it.
you pay for it. And you're going to get these results. And I'm calling it now. Robinson is not going to be governor in North Carolina. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't buy it.
I agree with you.
No, and Biden could come within. I bet you Biden could still lose North Carolina by 3 points, just like this poll says. And Josh Stein, the Democrat, still beats Robinson.
Yeah.
Because Robinson is such a heavy lift to make.
Yes.
All of this opposition research just punneling on the airwaves. Everyone in the state knows he's kind of a whack job, unless you're totally bought in.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's so hard to make the argument for him. I'm looking at one quote that he has here about like other dictators. Quote, whether you're talking about Adolf Hitler, whether you're talking about Chairman Mao, whether you're talking about Stalin, whether you're talking about Pol Pot, whether you're talking about Castro in Cuba, or whether you're talking about a dozen other despots all around the globe, it is time for us to get back and start reading some of those quotes. Now, I will say I am pretty sure he was saying this in a context of saying they're worth paying attention to, rather than we need to read those quotes to be scared of what they're saying.
Yeah.
And if that's true, how is that not an automatic disqualification of the guy, right? Like that is pure insanity.
Yes. I don't understand it. Listen, I don't understand what Republicans see in him. I don't know too much of his economic philosophy. That might be because I've only been seeing his bad stuff, but I think he only says the bad stuff. I don't think he has an economic agenda that I could be studying or looking into. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not the type of politician he is.
No, it's not. He's big on, transgender bathroom related things. Which
Yes.
is a weird thing to care about what the genitals are in people's pants all the time. I don't know why that's such a big deal to you, Robinson. So that's what's going on in North Carolina. Now, in Ohio, we've also had a recent primary election that just happened yesterday. So this is more relevant. There were three major candidates in this one. Frank LaRose, who's the current Secretary of State, Matt Dolan, who's a state senator, and then Bernie Moreno. Now, Matt Dolan was a big self-funder of his campaign. I'm pretty sure he owns or is related to the baseball team over in Ohio. The Cleveland Braves turned into Cleveland.
No, they were the Cleveland Indians, now the Cleveland Guardians.
Yeah, so he changed the name from Cleveland Indians to Cleveland Guardians. The MAGA crowd hit him hard on that for catering to the woke mob. Swear to God.
I believe it.
I just, oh God.
Yeah.
Politics is so serious, people. It really is. And then Bernie Moreno, car salesman. Those are the three candidates that we got for the Ohio Senate on the Republican side. So Matt Dolan. So first of all, I want to say I was wrong. Okay. You go back 3 months from now. I said, don't even look at Matt Dolan. He's going to be gone in a couple weeks. I said that like 3 months ago. Like, don't even worry about Matt Dolan. Like, don't even think about him.
Okay.
Like, put him out of your heads. It's going to be between Frank LaRose and Bernie Moreno. I was wrong. Frank LaRose fell out of favor pretty quick after his push for ballot referendum 1 failed, and he was kind of nationally embarrassed. I thought that would at least give him the name recognition to keep him in the running. I was incorrect. Apparently, it did enough damage to him where no one wanted to be associated with him. And that included Republican establishment figures, because literally Matt Dolan only came up the stretch about 2 weeks ago. It was a horse race between LaRose and Moreno for the whole time, and then the last 2 weeks, Dolan starts shooting up. Why? Well, Matt Dolan got the endorsement of the governor, Mike DeWine. He got the endorsement of an outgoing senator, Rob Portman, who's a very moderate Republican. He worked on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act with Biden and Kyrsten Sinema. And Republicans, MAGA Republicans attacked him on that. They said that Matt Dolan's going to be the next Mitt Romney. They said that Matt Dolan was a sellout, that he was a globalist, and all this other stuff. And they were painting him with all the whatever buzzwords, uniparty language that the MAGA crowd throws at their opposition. And he couldn't break out of that. But the polls showed it tied race between Matt Dolan and Bernie Moreno down the stretch. Tied. And then it was a blowout.
Complete blowout.
Bernie Moreno got 50.5% of the vote. Matt Dolan only got 33%.
Yeah.
Just a blowout. And even in the suburbs, Franklin County, Ohio, if you're into Ohio politics, Franklin County is a very important county. It's one of the major suburban areas. And that's where Matt Dolan was supposed to shine. And he didn't have good margins.
Damn.
Bernie Moreno did fine in the suburbs. That wasn't expected.
Huh.
And so Matt Dolan's night ended pretty quickly after like the first 3% of the votes coming in, I saw the results from Franklin. I'm like, oh, it's probably done. It's probably done. Something magical would have to happen.
Damn.
And something magical did not happen. So, again, this asks the question, what was best for Republicans? What does this mean for the general election? Well, Matt Dolan was obviously the better pick. Pretty much obviously, okay? There's really no getting around it. He had the endorsement of the governor, Mike DeWine, who won his re-election by 20-plus points. Rob Portman won his last election by around 19, 20-something points.
Wow.
Those are the people who were endorsing him.
Wow.
And then Moreno is a trash candidate for a historically swing state like Ohio. It's red tinted now for sure, but it was voting for Obama in 2012. It was voting for Obama in 2008, and Clinton and whatever. So it's not like it's just a solid red like Nebraska or Idaho, right?
Yeah, and yet, like with a Republican governor and going for Trump in 2020, you would think there's a clear path for the Republican nominee for the Senate to get elected.
Oh yeah,
and now they're completely putting that in jeopardy.
Completely. So let's go to the polls here, okay? These polls were taken a couple days before the election result, all right? So they polled Brown, Sherrod Brown, running as a Democrat incumbent for the senator in Ohio. They polled Brown against all of the possible Republican candidates. So first up, Brown versus Dolan. Brown 45, Dolan 42. Brown up 3. Margin of error, basically tied race, close race, would have to be a horse race. A lot of undecideds, could break either way. Brown versus Moreno. Brown 47, Moreno 36. Brown up 11. Which means that Moreno has a much larger problem with name recognition. And so people need to get to know Moreno. People have to learn about Moreno.
I do wonder if it's not as much of a problem as we might make it out to be, though. Because
maybe.
When it comes to the general, it's going to be more just D versus R.
What really the important number is did Brown hit 50%? And the answer is no, right? Brown is close to 50. So think about the number of undecideds in this poll, right? Brown only has to win a small percentage of them, while Moreno has to win almost all of them. That's really the way I look at these things.
Okay.
If it was like Brown 41, Moreno 36,
sure,
I'd be more worried.
Okay.
And that lead would tell me nothing.
Okay.
But the fact that he's so close to 50 means there's a viable path. By no means a shoo-in. I wouldn't even say the favorite, to be honest.
Really?
Because Ohio will be voting for Donald Trump. And if Ohio will be voting for Donald Trump, it's going to be hard to split the ticket. That's It doesn't happen much in American politics anymore. It's very rare.
It's interesting that you're so confident that Ohio will vote for Trump.
Yeah, I know it is interesting because the exit polls indicated that Haley voters in Ohio aren't voting for Trump. Like half of them won't be voting for Trump.
And based on the ballot referendums that Ohio has had, including the one to enshrine abortion as a right in the state constitution.
No, it's a good point. Ohio might be on the map.
I mean, but and yet everything I read says the same thing as what you're saying. Everything I read says Ohio is almost certainly going to go for Trump. Mm-hmm. Why is this? Like, why? Again, it's like it's kind of this mysterious personality hold that he has, which I'm bad at articulating anymore specifically.
I'll tell you the real answer why Republicans started winning Ohio. The answer is Democrats started losing the union vote.
Okay.
In 2016, the Democrats lost the union vote in Ohio for the first time. And when they started losing the union vote, Democrat can win in Ohio if they don't have the union vote.
Really?
Yeah. So it flipped in 2000. When John Kerry was facing off against Bush, right? I think John Kerry lost Ohio, but he won the union vote like 51-49. It was close.
Okay.
It was close. Then Obama comes in, trounces with the union vote. Obama comes in, trounces. Wait, what did I say?
You said Obama comes in, trounces with the union vote.
Does great with the
Obama
union
comes
vote.
in, you just said it twice.
Sorry. So 2008, Obama does very well with the union vote. 2012, Obama does very well with the union vote. 2016, Hillary Clinton does not. And it bottoms out. And then it becomes 60-40 pro-Trump.
Does that happen in 2020 as well?
Yeah. 58 or something like that.
What do you think happens in 24 with the union vote?
I don't know, man. It's a hard call.
Maybe 55 instead of 58.
Yeah, but that's not enough to flip Ohio. You know what I mean? Like, it would need to flip back to the 60-40
Yeah.
in order to win Ohio. So I do think Biden will be gaining ground with union voters. I genuinely do. Especially because of J.D. Vance's performance in the last cycle in 2022. J.D. Vance won by 6 percentage points over Tim Ryan in the last Senate election 2022. That's less than what Trump won Ohio by, and it was what was supposed to be a Republican wave year, which makes me think that Biden could improve on J.D. Vance's numbers a bit. That's what I think. Maybe Joe Biden could, or Tim Ryan's numbers, whatever. Joe Biden might be able to get lose Ohio only by 5 instead of by 8. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And that could come from that union vote swing. But we're getting into the weeds here.
Yes, we're
and
getting
I
off
want to
track.
circle back to Moreno and the type of guy he is. And so all these undecideds who are now going to come in and learn about Moreno for the first time, what are they going to be hearing? Well, they're going to hear that he backs a federal abortion ban. I don't know the exact week number he's putting at. I think he was vague on that for the primaries in order to be the furthest right in the primary because he didn't want to be like the moderate guy.
Okay.
He also, this is the classic one I've said about him numerous times, he suggested that white Union soldiers should get reparations for slavery instead of those who were descendants of slaves. He said, where are the reparations for the people in the North who died to save the lives of black people? Which is just a wild thing to say.
It is.
Wild. Disqualifying even.
Crazy.
Unless you're a Republican. Then I
Yeah.
guess you can put that on a bumper sticker. I don't know. I don't know, man.
I don't know either.
But it's just notable because I think the Republicans are going down a path where they have opportunities to get power and they keep nominating freak shows that normal people are just going to look at and be like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Right?
And that's not true across the board. 'Cause
No, not
just
at all.
to be clear, sometimes the freak shows win.
Yeah, sometimes the freak shows win.
Yes.
Sometimes the Republicans don't nominate freak shows.
Yes, but the idea is across the board, on average, the freak shows are going to be losing more than they're going to be winning.
Yeah.
And so they might kind of be sloughing off bits of power is the idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I want to stick on the Senate now because the path for the Democrats to win the Senate or to keep the Senate is to keep Ohio and keep Montana.
It's funny, as I was just saying that,
Yeah.
like the crazies are going to make the Republicans slowly lose power. I thought about the current Senate outlook for 2024 and thought about how, well, I'm not so sure they're going to be losing that much power here because they are set up so well to pick up seats in 2024.
Let's be very clear. If Republicans don't win the Senate in 2024, the party has massive problems. This map is designed for Republicans to pick up seats.
Yeah.
The Democrats' best opportunity at picking up a Senate seat is Texas. That's taking out Ted Cruz. That's the best shot Democrats have of flipping a seat.
Mm-hmm.
Democrats are playing defense everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't take a Senate majority, when your opponents only have 51 seats, if you can't win that, when your opponents are defending across the whole nation, you got problems.
Yeah.
Your party has problems. And so what are the 3 states that Republicans are targeting more than anything? West Virginia, Ohio, Montana.
Yeah, and West Virginia is almost not even worth talking about because it's gone.
It's gone. Joe Manchin is not running for re-election.
Yeah.
It's gone. Okay? It's gone. All that's left is Montana and Ohio for the Democrats to defend and keep the Senate. And listen, that's to say they can hold Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona, and Nevada, which is all somewhat heavy lifting. The polling is good for Democrats in all those states, but it's not guarantees. Of course not. But Montana, this is the one I want to focus on now. We have John Tester, incumbent Democrat from Montana, versus Tim Sheehy, businessman, I think from out of state originally, but been in Montana for a while. The polling for John Tester has been looking pretty good. It's been looking pretty solid. Polls in mid-February had John Tester up 9 against Tim Sheehy,
That's really good.
putting him at 49-40, which is really nice to see. More recent poll happening 2 weeks ago had Tester up only by 2, 44-42. Not good, but average him out. You know, Tester's holding his own. I don't like that he's an incumbent that far away from 50% in the newest poll, but that's all right. You got time. And what's so interesting about this is John Tester is running in Montana, right? This is a state that Trump won by like 20-something points in 2020. John Tester's going to need to outrun Joe Biden by like 20 points or like 15, 19 points.
Yeah.
He's going to have to do that much better, get that much cross-party appeal, which is so hard to do. It's so hard to do. But the stars are aligning. And here's why.
Okay.
John Tester actually has a chance. There will be an abortion referendum on the ballot in Montana during the presidential election.
That is great news for a Democrat.
No, it's huge because now this is going to drive up turnout like nobody's business, right? So the Montana Supreme Court says Attorney General Austin, can't pronounce their last name, erred in finding the proposal for the 2024 ballot legally insufficient. So to be clear, the petitioners wanted to put this on the ballot. The Attorney General said, nope, not going to happen. Supreme Court's like, I don't care what you say, Attorney General, it's going to be on the ballot. Or at least you have to give them the chance to get it on the ballot. To gain access, the campaign is going to need to get 60,000 signatures verified by June 21st. So if you live in Montana, go contact your local Democratic Party and start signing this stuff. If you don't, I don't know.
Chill out.
It's not okay. So would be a major deal for Democrats. If they are able to drive up turnout, this is going to be the thing that could put Tester over the edge for sure. If we're worried about Democrats not being that favorable of Joe Biden and not too excited to go vote, you know what they are excited to vote about? Abortion rights.
Yeah.
And while they're at the ballot box, you think they're going to leave John Tester and Biden blank? No, they're not going to do that. They're going to vote for Tester and vote to protect their right to choose. And this is like the best case scenario for Democrats.
Yeah.
This is actually a Republican strategy from 2004. So Karl Rove was the campaign strategist for George Bush. And one of the things that he was designing was getting referendums on ballots across the country about legalizing gay marriage. And so that would drive up conservative turnout in these somewhat swing states that could carry George Bush over the finish line. And some people say it was very successful in 2004 at getting Bush reelected.
Damn.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it looks like Democrats have taken that initiative and been like, maybe this is the right way to go, which I totally support. I want more things to be done by referendum anyway.
Yeah.
I'm a huge supporter of referendum.
It is a good strategic move, at least.
Yeah.
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 The only other thing I would say about why Tester I think would have an advantage, I imagine Montana Republicans to be they're Republicans because they're alienated by the coastal elites.
Oh yeah.
Right? John Tester is no coastal elite. Right? Anyone who has ever seen him knows that he is not a coastal elite.
Dude, he's a farmer. He posts pictures of all of his stuff. He like posts pictures of him like with the animals he's butchered. He's got like he's missing 3 fingers. He's walking around like this.
Exactly.
You know?
Biden, on the other hand, Biden tries hard to sell that he is not one. But he doesn't do it that well.
He's a senator from Delaware who's been in the Senate since 29. The dude's a coastal elite.
Yes.
At the end of the day, the dude is pretty much a coastal elite.
Yes.
You know?
Totally. So I think that'll play well for Tester.
Yeah, and John Tester has another strategy that I think is so brilliant, and this is the type of grassroots outreach and activism that the Democratic Party needs to be doing across the country. Montana Democrats launched a $1 million voting initiative. $1 million voting initiative on Monday that will work to turn out Montana's tribal voters for John Tester in the toughest Senate race yet. So this is really, really important. There are about 60,000 eligible Native American voters in Montana. John Tester won his 2018 election by only 18,000 votes.
Wow.
So if you can mobilize the tribal population, these Native American voters, and earn their vote, don't just placate to them, right? Don't just shower them with money and think you're going to get the vote by putting campaign ads up in there. You have to prove it. And looking into what he's done, it seems like he's really putting the priorities of the Native Americans in his state at the top of his mind. He has supported a voting rights bill specifically focused on making it easier for Native American communities to vote by putting more ballot boxes in different neighborhoods. And he has secured record investments to improve aging infrastructure on tribal land, including upgrades to high-speed internet, water systems, health facilities, and public transportation. So if you're John Tester, you got to go out with this $1 million ad buy and get this information into the Native American voters in the state every day until November, right? And if he does that, if he's able to properly mobilize this portion of the state that is underrepresented and underfunded, then some really great things could happen for Tester, this population, and the country overall.
It's interesting. It's interesting because I think about the deep dive we did a while back on shifting political coalitions. And we talked about how, for example, black voters have been aligned with Democrats for a long time. And it's because it made a lot of sense because black people were treated differently by the law for a long time, and they wanted to vote for the party that got them treated more equally by the law. Now we think black voters might start to become more of a swing voter population, but Native American voters who live on tribal lands, they are still treated differently by the law.
Yeah.
Right. How tribal lands are treated is different. They have different rules. And so it makes sense to say, yeah, I'm supporting the legislation that specifically applies to you and helps you out.
Absolutely. And Montana is 7% Native American. That's a massive
That's
population, and it's underserved completely. And if you can be the candidate that earns that and serves them properly, good for you.
Yeah.
You know? So I really like his strategy. I think it's really, really effective. And I think he has a good enough shot. Again, I wouldn't say he's the favorite, but he's got a good enough shot.
Okay.
He hasn't been losing in a poll yet, which is a good place to be.
That definitely is a good place to be. I think let's move on to what else we have on electoral politics.
Do I have anything else? I do.
Yeah, on fundraising for Trump and Biden. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yeah. Let me do that. So, Joe Biden is rolling in cash like Scrooge McDuck right now, dude. He is diving into those gold coins in his basement. Yeah. The Biden campaign, in combination with the DNC, raised $53 million in February. That means that in total, they have $155 million cash on hand. That is up from $130 million last month. Compare this with Trump and the RNC. They only have $40 million cash on hand. Less than a third of what the Democrats have. Mr. Biden's campaign has received 469,000 contributions. I'm sorry. They have received contributions from 469,000 different donors, and 178,000 of those donors are making monthly donations. They're recurring their donation each month. That's reliable, consistent cash. And so the Joe Biden's numbers are just doing really well with the small dollar donors right now. That's where he's thriving. And it's really important because in 2016, Donald Trump was the small dollar donor king. Donald Trump was the one who was raking in all the bucks with the small dollar donors. And now it's Joe Biden who's doing that. What's notable about this number, this $155 million cash on hand, is that this isn't including what he's raised so far in March, and he has raised a lot of money so far in March. After the State of the Union speech, he raised $10 million in 24 hours.
That's crazy.
A fifth of his entire February haul in one day.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's more than the bump that Trump got when he was indicted.
Nice.
That's good. I mean, that's amazing. That's showing momentum.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I want to let you finish this, but I also wonder if we should touch on the State of the Union.
Oh, yeah, let's touch on the State of the Union.
Okay.
Let's do it. So, what did you think about the State of the Union?
I was probably slightly less impressed by it than the rest of at least the liberal community.
Okay.
Only because I felt like it did feel rushed to me.
Okay.
Like he was maybe trying to pack a little bit too much in. And like I kind of agree with the criticisms that he might have been overcompensating. Like it feels
like yelling too much, or
I guess yelling, but more just like trying to get it all out. Like he was forcing and pushing and pushing and pushing.
Okay.
All that said, still like an 8 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10 performance.
Oh yeah, I think
Yes.
8.5 is a really fair metric. I really do.
Yeah.
I have to say his substance was beautiful. I got to be honest. Like when I took notes during the speech and I was waiting for certain policy priorities to come out. I was waiting. And I got almost all of them that I wanted to hear.
Which ones were you looking for?
Passed the PRO Act.
Okay.
He said it.
Mm-hmm.
Low-income housing tax credit. Heard it. Taxes on billionaires. He talked about the minimum tax on billionaires.
Yeah.
The ones that I wanted to hear him say explicitly that he was balancing the budget for Medicare, which he is planning on doing if you read his 2025 budget. Next week, we should do a deep dive of Joe Biden's entire 2025 budget plan because it's very important to understand that's the type of president he wants to be in the next term. Mm-hmm. But he has some amazing ideas. He just needs to get them out there. And I think he did so effectively with the State of the Union.
Yeah.
I watched it with my dad, who is a Republican and a Trump supporter. But as we're watching the speech, Dad couldn't disagree with much. Dad's watching. He's like, no, billionaires should pay the same percentage rate as firefighters. That makes sense.
Yeah.
No, corporations should have to pay at least more taxes than, a teacher.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. All right. That's all right. No, we should only pay $35 for insulin capped, even for private insurance companies. That makes sense.
Yeah.
No, we should change the way we do late fees and change the way that credit card companies charge fees on us. No, that makes sense. Joe Biden just has to get that message out.
Yeah.
I
mean, and what, some 12 million people or more watched the State of the Union live, so that's a great place to get the message out. And I imagine if you're thinking about the average undecided voter, right, who's thinking about what's going to happen in November, and you're thinking about the State of the Union, which has as much reach as it does, there's no better platform, right? This is like the best opportunity he'll have to speak to that person until the election.
Oh, yeah. And he nailed it. He nailed it.
Yeah.
Listen, one of the criticisms that I don't agree with was that he was too political, that he was too partisan. I think it's important to be partisan in moments like this because you need to show the differences. You don't want the American people to be misinformed and not understand the disparities between the two parties. And you're the president. You're running for re-election. State your case. State your case. Why do you think you should be reelected? And he gave you great reasons why. He showed you how he was opposite from the Republicans when it comes to taxing billionaires, when it comes to not expanding the Trump tax cuts into the next decade, which Republicans will do for the high income earners. Joe Biden has said that he will keep the Trump tax cuts for everyone under $400,000, but repeal them for people who make over $400,000.
Yeah.
Okay?
What do you think of the idea? Because I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, for sure.
When you were starting to say that, I was thinking, I agree with distinguishing yourself from Trump on things like defending Ukraine or evangelizing how you were trying to pass the immigration law and the Republicans pushed back against it and how the Republicans fucked up on that.
Yeah.
But I wonder about like taxation. Are we getting too far away from fundamental beliefs? Or like when he refers to January 6th, right? The fundamental freedom or democracy versus authoritarianism. To me, since those are differences in this rare case, it made sense for him to say, no, he's different than me and he's bad on that. Whereas in previous State of the Unions, those are the types of things that presidents would highlight commonality on between the two parties. And we're all working towards this.
Yes, that's a good point. That's a really good point because there's been a little bit more of a consensus in the past in regards to those national security things, in regards to the decorum of the institutions of the United States.
Our leadership on the world stage.
Yeah. These are things that used to be commonalities. And so because those commonalities no longer exist, the speech might come off as more partisan, right?
Yeah.
Because in a lot of
areas... But it makes sense for the moment.
Yes, it makes sense for the moment. And it's important because the American people need to know the difference and know the danger. The next thing I want to talk about with the State of the Union, Joe Biden's not too old. And Ezra Klein ate his poop. Ate his words, man.
Did you listen to...
No, I didn't listen. I read his article, though.
Okay.
I didn't listen to it. What did he say?
He said, yes, my concern was that Biden wouldn't be able to perform on the campaign trail as he was supposed to. And he said, I was extremely pleasantly surprised at the State of the Union that he nailed it.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed it. He had to put Ezra Klein had to put his foot in his mouth on that one.
Yeah.
He should have waited until after the State of the Union to make that podcast episode, and then we talked about, and the whole media system talked about for like 2 weeks. We're like, oh, is Joe Biden too old? And then goes out the State of the Union, and then everyone's like, Joe Biden was too angry. Joe Biden was too energetic.
Well, I think
Was Joe Biden on meth?
But I think it's okay, like, that it happened that way.
Yeah.
Because now we have a framing that we can specifically look at and say, oh, well, now we can be sure that's not the case, right?
It's also-
Obviously, it wasn't the case.
It's also funny because Republicans screwed themselves because they put the bar on the fucking floor.
Yeah.
So then all he had to do was step over the bar on the floor, and then everyone's like, oh, whoa, maybe he's not demented.
Yeah, but then they switch and they criticize and they say he's overcompensating, he's too angry, like...
Jesse Waters on Fox News is actually accusing him of being on methamphetamine. So, like...
Yeah.
Yeah. They totally lost the plot. But so 8.5, that's your State of the Union rating?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would go 8.5. I agree with you. It's the way to go.
Very good.
Very good.
Yeah.
Donald Trump didn't give a speech like that.
No.
No.
I was nervous about it going in.
Yeah,
I
I
must
was
say,
too.
right?
Oh, I was nervous.
Like, because if he fails this, it's going to be so hard to come back from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we honestly, I want to talk about one more thing with him. We really saw a lot of his personality when the way he walked to the State of the Union, his reaction to Marjorie Taylor Greene, if you've seen that infamous clip,
Yeah.
you know, or the way he shook hands and talked to every single person. He actually, I think this is accurate, you can check me, but I'm pretty sure this is right, spent the most amount of time in the congressional chambers walking in and walking out than any other president.
Oh,
Because he
really?
was talking to everybody.
Yes.
And that's that's what you want out of a leader.
Yeah, well,
You know? And it was from Republicans. He actually had a conversation with Mike Johnson's staff. For like 30 minutes, he was talking to Mike Johnson's staff. Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker of the House.
That's cool. Part of Ezra Klein's criticisms and worries, right, where he's just not getting out there enough, and it seems like the campaign doesn't want him out there that much because they think it's not an asset to show the candidate right now. And I don't know, it felt like every bit of what he did that night for the State of the Union was showing that he still can do it. And I feel like now the campaign has shifted, not just with the State of the Union, but since he's been out on the trail more, right? You have been seeing him more. He's giving more speeches. These ads are starting to come through with him. And so I think now that the campaign's getting ramped up, it's a lot more encouraging as far as his chances of convincing people that he really can do this job.
Oh yeah, I think it alleviated a lot of concerns that the moderates may have, or those moderate undecided voters who would look at him and be like, no, you know, I think I'm just going to sit this one out. Like both of them are just demented, crazy people, right?
Yes.
And then they watch the State of the Union, they're like, okay, well at least Joe Biden's not demented.
No.
Right?
No, he's clear, and it's not just that he's clear. He knows what he's talking about.
Yes, very
and that's
well.
obvious.
And I just have to say, again, I have to reiterate, the Democratic platform that these guys are running on, really the best that we've seen in such a long time. Just the idea of a president running on passing the PRO Act is so unbelievably important. One of the provisions in the PRO Act is allowing solidarity strikes again. That's huge. That means when one company goes on strike, other companies in non-related industries are allowed to go on strike in support of the company who is bargaining for their agreement, which puts way more pressure on capital and puts way more power in the hands of workers.
Yeah, it's a Nordic country style system, right? Law to put in place to it's not just individual unions, it's all workers as a union.
Yes,
basically.
that's the way to think about it.
Yeah.
One big union, baby. So yeah, Joe Biden, State of the Union, great job.
Great job.
So back to government shutdown news. Again,
Hooray.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like every other week we're talking about this, but Mike Johnson in the House of Representatives has recently just passed a government funding bill that will fund the government all the way up to September. This bill was passed with majority Democrat votes and did not receive the majority Republican votes. 101 around there Republicans voted for it, 112 voted against it.
Which, to be clear, is the exact same story we've had for all of the continuing resolutions, which was 3 or 4 that were passed before this. I think 3.
Maybe. Yeah. I couldn't even tell you.
So 3 continuing resolutions, and now this new bill that is finally supposed to fund through 2024.
Finally.
All have been passed with majority Democrat support in the House, which is controlled by Republicans.
And so, like, this is a really great example of the government literally would not be functional without Democrat bipartisanship with Republicans that are at least somewhat sane.
Yes, and to the government, I mean, even to call this a functional government is a bit of a stretch because we have the least functional Congress that we've had in history. But for even these bare minimum, allowing it to exist, like to not shut down, Yeah,
So
we
then
need Democrats.
Then the good question is, how did Mike Johnson even make this happen? Because I just told you, he didn't even pass this bill with the majority of Republican votes. How did he even get it onto the floor? Well, he avoided the rules completely.
Yeah.
He passed this through something called a suspension of the rules, which means you don't have to run the House in general order and allow for amendments and let things go through the committees and stuff. If you pass something with a suspension of the rule, it takes 2/3 of the House and it passes through. Democrats and Republicans made up that 2/3 to breeze it right through. The 112 Republicans that voted against this are absolutely furious. One of the things in this government funding bill was increasing the number of beds, increasing at the border, increasing the number of Border Patrol agents. And a Republican of the House Freedom Caucus went on TV and said, "Why are we helping Joe Biden in an election year?" And so this is where we're at with these hard-line right-wing Republicans.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, that Republicans are working against what is supposedly their own agenda for what are clearly, openly political motivations, just to try to tarnish Joe Biden in an election year.
Yeah, the partisanship is deep right now. But it gets worse for Republicans. Not only did the majority of Republicans vote to shut down the government, Marjorie Taylor Greene, right after this happened, approached the head of the House of Representatives and submitted a motion to vacate against Mike Johnson. Now, you don't know what a motion to vacate is. That's when one member of Congress is able to say, "I want to kick the speaker out. Let's have a vote on kicking out the speaker of the House of Representatives."
Yeah.
It has only happened once in U.S. history, against Kevin McCarthy a couple months ago.
Yeah, this mechanism was first introduced because Kevin McCarthy had such a hard time initially getting elected as speaker from his own Republicans in the House.
If I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure it took 5 petitioners to file a motion to vacate, and McCarthy brought it down to 1 petitioner to put the motion to vacate on the table. So Marjorie Taylor Greene puts in this motion to vacate. Twitter blows up. The news blows up. Everyone's like, "Oh my God, wait a second. This again? It's Groundhog Day all over again. This is insanity."
Yep.
And then she goes onto the Capitol steps and she starts explaining her position. She's like, "Listen, I submitted the motion to vacate. That just means that I have the authority to rise and say that I want to vacate. It doesn't mean I'm going to yet." She's like, "It's really a warning." I don't really know about that. We'll see. We'll see about that.
Yeah.
House is going to be on recess for the next 2 weeks. So if this happens, it's going to be happening in April. And so for these next 2 weeks, Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be looking for an alternative to Mike Johnson right now. And the House Freedom Caucus and these other hard right Republicans are going to be lobbying for a new person to take up the speaker's chair. I can't think of a worse place for the Republicans to be going into what could be their most important election years.
Yeah, this is I mean, that's probably why Green was trying to walk things back.
Yes, that's
in the media.
exactly why. I totally agree.
Yeah, they already look so dysfunctional. They are so dysfunctional, and they look it. And to further that by vacating the chair again is just, it's ridiculous. I mean, they've been a laughingstock. It's like, how much more can you pile on?
And so
right?
now, there's so many different avenues to talk about this. I want to go first with the hardcore, just electoral politics. Mike Johnson is already having a hard time raising money. Now he has people in his conference pushing a motion to vacate. Who's going to want to give Mike Johnson money? He might not even be around a year from now. What is the incentive of anyone to donate to the Mike Johnson committees? There's no reason.
Yeah, which we talked about when we talked about Johnson's struggle in fundraising, right? It's like there's just no trust, and the signs just keep piling up that there shouldn't be trust.
No.
Right?
No. He's not a solidified leader at all. He's a guy who happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Yes.
You know, and
totally.
now he's in the fucking wrong place.
Yeah. No, he was chosen because it's like he's enough of almost a non-figure.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's not. He'll be upheld. He's almost the purest politician you could imagine.
Yeah.
He's just trying to survive.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Now, from internal, policy perspective, what does this mean? Well, Mike Johnson's going to do everything he can to stay alive. Mike Johnson isn't going to take the vacate lightly. And so Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the Democrats in the House, has already said, like, no, we'll help Mike Johnson, but we'll think about it. We can help Mike Johnson if you fund Ukraine fully.
Did he say Ukraine specifically?
Yes, he said yes. They've already been saying Ukraine specifically.
Okay,
that language is already coming out.
I only read that they would Democrats would save Johnson if they got more leeway to decide what was discussed and what kind of bills went to the floor of the House. So I didn't know about the specifics.
Okay. Yes. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they did mention Ukraine.
Maybe it's both. Maybe it's Ukraine specifically, but also in general, as far as putting bills up for debate, the Democrats can have some say.
Yeah. So, and Mike Johnson, that's not good for Republicans either, because no Republican is going to want to donate to a Speaker of the House who's propped up by Democrats.
No, I mean,
right?
If he's propped up by Democrats, is he going to get reelected?
No.
Right? Like he can
even
get primary
reelected.
like that.
Oh,
he can get
that's such a good point.
that.
If he gets propped up by the Democrats, he'll just get primary.
Yeah.
Yeah, his political career's over. What a terrible incentive structure we've built.
Oh my God. Yeah, our system is broken.
Our incentive structure is just so messed up. But if we go through another motion to vacate, I mean, the Republican Party needs to face some serious electoral defeats in November. Like the party needs to be punished for this. I'm not saying that they will be. They very well might keep the House. Well, however unlikely I think it is.
I think it's super unlikely.
Yeah.
As well.
No,
I mean, what they're doing right now is they're just digging the hole deeper and deeper.
Dude.
They have so many vulnerable seats already, and if I don't know anyone who pays any attention, right? They know, like, how are you not rolling your eyes at this? How are you not like, come fucking on?
Yeah. And now Marjorie Taylor Greene is making the whole place look like a bunch of clown shows, and they already are. And it's just crazy. My dad is a Republican, and I called him when it happened, and he was like, I'm sorry, what happened? I'm like, Dad, she just voted, she submitted to vacate Mike Johnson. He's like, no, she didn't. And then he turns on the TV, and he sees her, and she's like, why would she do that? He was so frustrated. He's like, this is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
And that's coming from like a Republican. So,
yeah.
Oh, God. People see it, man. People see it if they just open their eyes and watch and read what's going on.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of almost like a problem with Fox News. Now, Fox News, as pro-Republican as they are, they can't not report on what's happening.
Yes.
So, like,
exactly.
if you, and even Fox has trouble spinning these things as normal or okay.
Yeah.
Like, they don't know how to report on this in a favorable way to Republicans because there isn't any. It's just incompetent.
No, they're gonna try to say it and report on it, and then just move on to how Joe Biden walks like a Roomba when he's trying to get off stage, right?
Yeah.
He's like they're gonna say it, and then they'll move on really quick and be like, oh, actually, Joe Biden was on meth during the State of the Union. Right?
Yes.
They're just gonna
Let's not linger on that.
Yeah.
Go to something else.
Exactly. So we'll see what happens with Mike Johnson over the next 2 weeks. He has 2 weeks to plan his future while the House is in recess. So we'll see.
I do what we were talking about just before this, because this news came out just hours ago today, is how heroic of a story will it be if like they're able to leverage this to get this aid for Ukraine through?
Oh my God.
Like something so important that will come out of something so silly.
Yes.
It would be fantastic.
Yes, I see this as like the climactic moment in a book that's going to be written 20 years from now about the most dysfunctional Congress in American history.
It is. It's almost like, in Game of Thrones, how you have especially in the early seasons, you have all these different threads with different character arcs that are happening at the same time.
Yes.
And then slowly as they come closer and closer together as you get closer to the end. That's what's happening right now. It's like this silly story of the Republicans not being able to function and this extremely serious war that's happening in Ukraine are coming together, and this is how it's supposed to fall out.
Wow.
Hopefully.
Wow. Imagine if Marjorie Taylor Greene is the reason we get Ukraine funding. Oh, man. That's hilarious.
Thanks, Marjorie.
Thank you. If you need any more evidence to understand the true gravity differences between Joe Biden and Trump's administration, this story is the best example. A judge nominated by Donald Trump has overruled a National Labor Relations Board decision made under the Biden administration. And this was a National Labor Relations Board decision, NLRB decision, that we were praising just 2 weeks ago or so. Okay? Judge J. Campbell Barker of the United States District Court in Eastern Texas vacated a rule issued by the NLRB determining when a company is a joint employer, making it liable under labor law for the working conditions of those hired by a franchise or provided by a staffing agency. So this is a complicated rule.
Yeah.
But let's go over what it means, because the main pushback against this ruling came from McDonald's, one of the largest franchisors in the United States. And McDonald's was arguing like, hey, we aren't in charge of the labor management of all of our separate McDonald's franchisees across the country. If there's a labor dispute in one of our McDonald's in the middle of Kansas City, Don't come at the McDonald's executives. Go after the franchisor owner of that one specific McDonald's in Kansas City. Don't go after, the top level executives. And the NLRB was saying, hey, McDonald's, if you have food standards, drink standards, size standards, hour standards, all these different standards, why are you not enforcing labor standards as well as a portion of that?
Yes.
Right? And so you obviously have some type of operational control of these individual franchise stores.
Yeah, the franchise model is still, there's a contract with each franchisee basically that says, okay, you need to use this exact logo of McDonald's, right? These are your colors. This is the food quality that you need to have. And if you don't, then you don't get to operate as a McDonald's store anymore.
Yes.
You can just do the same thing with labor.
Yes. And so they were trying to argue, we don't have direct managerial control. And the NLRB used those different web connectors of all the different ways, the different cups that you're allowed to use, all those different ways that McDonald's executives force operating procedures on the individual McDonald's stores that say, no, you do have operational control and you should be completely liable for any type of labor disputes.
Yeah.
And the franchisors, McDonald's, argued it would totally disrupt their business model, right? Because now workers had a lot more leverage. Workers weren't just going after the local guy in their town who's making a good living owning a McDonald's. Now these workers are going to be going after the executives of McDonald's, which is now way more expensive for the McDonald's corporation to deal with. Because if one franchisee goes down for a labor dispute, they don't care.
Yeah. And I mean, it when you think about it, McDonald's is going to have to spend a lot of more money on additional managerial services, I would think, right? I'm imagining them hiring not a consulting company, but an outside labor management company that's going to have to evaluate standards at all of its franchises all the time. That's not easy.
No.
It's not cheap. And it makes sense that they would complain about it.
Yeah, they don't want to expose themselves to the risk of all these different franchisees now. So McDonald's is going to have to crack down harder on each individual store and probably hire a lot more labor lawyers because these labor lawyers are going to have to make check-ins, like you were saying, to these different places and make sure that the NLRB won't be knocking on their doors or any workers are being mistreated.
Yeah.
The U.S. Chamber of Commerce was also another lobbying group that was pushing the NLRB hard to not pass this rule. It says the Chamber of Commerce said it will prevent businesses from facing new liabilities related to workplaces they don't control and workers they don't actually employ. That's very, very difficult to make the argument when we're talking about McDonald's. It becomes slightly more of a reasonable argument where at least you could have it when it's a hospital maybe hiring a traveling nurse, right? Maybe, but you're still in the workplace as the traveling nurse in the hospital.
Okay.
But it's that joint employer contract basis where the Chamber of Commerce was trying to argue more on.
Yeah. I think it's a smart argument, right? You can draw a very clear line between we're not in the workplace, so we don't have to do with the workers.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to argue against it.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. But the point is, the NLRB appointed by Joe Biden will always, if it's an up in the air call, they're going to side on the side of the workers.
Yes, they're going to do everything they can to exert more control in favor of labor.
Yes, pretty much every time. If it's a jump ball, it's going to the labor side. So the NLRB chair, Lauren McPherson, said that this won't be the last time that they argue this. They're gonna appeal it. They tried to appeal it to a DC court, but that request got denied. So instead, it's going to be appealed in the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals is the most conservative court of appeals in the country, which is why these guys brought the lawsuit in Eastern Texas. So if they wanted to appeal, they could only go to the Fifth Circuit.
Yep.
Which is a terrible way to form the system. But now, where am I going with this? Point is, this is a major difference between the Trump and Biden administration. And it's important that people who care about labor, workers' rights, and union rights really take this into consideration when they choose who to cast their vote for.
Yeah, if you're pro-business, this is probably going to make you more against Biden.
Yeah.
If you are pro-big business and you're pro-less regulation. But if you are pro-little guy McDonald's worker against big guy McDonald's, Biden is clearly the person on that side.
Yeah. Listen, if you are in a union, there is no good reason to vote for Trump over Joe Biden at this point.
At least economically.
At least economically. Right? There could be cultural stuff that we disagree on, that you disagree with Biden on. I understand that, and we can't convince you of that. And neither can Joe Biden. But the truth is, if your concerns are with labor, your paycheck, unions,
your quality of work life,
then Joe Biden is the president for you, because he is appointing people to the NLRB. He actually went around the rules a little bit and kicked off all the Trump-appointed members of the NLRB in a totally unprecedented move.
Really?
Yeah, he kicked all of the Trump appointees off the NLRB and put his own people on it.
Okay.
And so he just did a whole takeover of the National Labor Relations Board.
Wow.
No other president would be doing that. Obama wouldn't be doing that. That's a huge difference between the Biden and Obama administration, too.
Yeah.
This is a really good example of how far the Democrats have moved in the right direction in response to labor issues over the last decade. Obama was kind of toothless on it.
Yes.
He didn't care too much. And a lot of these court cases and a lot of the people arguing against a lot of the Joe Biden NLRB decisions are actually old Obama lawyers.
Really?
Yes, a lot of them are old Obama lawyers.
Wow.
Yeah, Obama did not surround himself with the best. That's for sure. That's for sure.
I mean, Obama's that's a whole
other thing.
We won't go into that.
It's just really good to see the NLRB being on the front lines again. I feel like I'm hearing more and more and more about their actions taken in favor of labor. And it's just been decades of nothing.
Yes.
And so like the UAW and the United Steelworkers, these unions are seeing this and they're like, holy crap, I actually see momentum and movement in favor of our interests.
Yeah.
And that's why they're coming out and endorsing Joe Biden. The U.S. Steelworkers recently just endorsed Joe Biden.
Yes, they did. It's a great example of we talk about how the candidate matters, and that's usually in a campaign that we talk about it. But in this case, the specific politician matters. Like individual actions and decisions, they matter. They change the scope or the landscape of labor.
No,
right?
of course.
And Biden has completely lifted them to another level.
Yeah, and what's so depressing is the rule is vacated simply because Donald Trump was in office for 4 years. And while he was in office for 4 years, he had control of the Senate. And with all that power, he appointed judges across the country that are going to fight any type of movement of progress for labor in the country. And if more judges get appointed by Republican administrations, it's going to be harder and harder to change the system in a way that makes the country work better for working people.
I do wonder, so the general tension that we talk about is between giving more rights and more money to labor and to have businesses operate efficiently enough, effectively enough that you're not losing jobs.
Right.
Do you think McDonald's, for example, if this rule is held in place, if they need to on their own enforce labor standards at all of their franchises, are they going to shut down a lot of franchises? Are people going to lose jobs? I guess that's something we couldn't know. We don't have the numbers in front of us. We can't really do the math. But
I guarantee you McDonald's was definitely putting up numbers saying that during the New Deal and when the National Recovery Administration, National Recovery Industrialization Administration, whatever, the NRA. When the NRA was passed, a lot of companies said simply like, we're not going to be able to afford to do this. You're going to shut us all down, right? And then they were going to FDR's administration saying that you're going to raise the cost of business too much and all of this is too much. And then it wasn't. And then they all survived. So I feel like in a lot of cases, that's what happens.
Okay.
One of the things we do see in the country going on right now is rising prices in a lot of these fast food places, right? We see that kind of across the United States. And we also see that at a time when the wages for lower wage workers are increasing rapidly.
Yep.
There's a direct correlation there.
Yeah.
That's happening for a reason. So like for all the people who ever said like, no, I want a $15 minimum wage. I don't care if my Big Mac is more expensive. That's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
You know? And I feel like that's what would happen if these things were taken into effect. Eventually the cost is going to come back onto the consumer slightly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
fine with it.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
The question is whether the cost that is passed on to the consumer
is worth
lowers demand enough so that these businesses start to become less viable.
Yeah.
And then they have to contract somewhat.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like you just don't know.
You just don't know.
You just don't know.
I don't know. I haven't seen any evidence for it. I think if I was the NLRB,
Mhm.
I would definitely be thinking about that. And as someone who's involved in municipal government, you always have to weigh the benefits and the negatives.
Yeah, because
You
it's always
have to.
contextual.
It's always
never absolute.
It's always a cost-benefit analysis, everything, okay?
Yes.
So, like, to be principled and just be overly ideological is a bad way to go about politics and policy. But doing that cost-benefit analysis, I would need to be proven that it would hurt the bottom line before I say no.
Okay.
Right? I would need to see the evidence that it does the damage.
Yeah, it's also hard because it's going to, the money can come from it's like where is the money going? Is it going to pay the workers, and is it coming from the top of the company? Is it coming from the executives who are already paid hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year? Or does it come from shutting down more plants?
Right.
I think that's part of why it's hard to make the argument too. It's like we always think that more money can just come from what is being siphoned out to the top of the company.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I've kind of started to come to the realization that that's not how it works.
Really true.
They just don't give up the money.
Right. They just don't give it up. They'll
And so
do anything else.
You have to take that into account. Like, that's part of the assumptions now.
With the NRA passed under FDR, one of the things that he had in there that with a couple of these industries was opening up their books and giving all the books over to the federal government so that they had to prove that if they were going to make a policy change that negatively impacted workers, they had to prove that that was the only way they could do it.
Interesting.
They fought hard against that, and that was knocked down by the Supreme Court.
Damn.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
No, listen, I would do it. If I was president right now, I would do that absolutely.
Really?
100%.
Or you would try at least.
I would try at least. If the
Yeah.
Supreme Court knocks it down, then, I'll try to win more elections to appoint more people. But point is, it's just a really nice, it's nice to see the federal government finally put their weight behind labor again after so many years.
Totally. So, in other news that has given me a massive existential crisis, the UN World Meteorological Organization published its annual State of the Global Climate Report a couple days ago to sound the red alert to the world on the urgency of the climate crisis.
Sounds so good. Sounds so good. Sounds so healthy.
It's terrified me with all of these records that we've set in 2023. We have record high greenhouse gas levels in the atmosphere, record high temperatures, record sea level rise, record ocean warmth, which has led to more than 90% of the global ocean experiencing heat wave conditions at some point in 2023. Record Antarctic sea ice loss. And so, yeah, we're breaking records all over the place right now.
90% of global ocean experienced heat wave conditions at some point in 2023. That sounds like we're going to have no fish left. That's what that sounds like.
That is part of what this said, I think, is that fish have been frantically migrating towards the poles of the Earth.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, in an effort to get away from the heat. So this was all obviously not good. And yet it felt like this hit me, and it was like depressing, but not actually terrifying, because we've been hearing about, last September was the hottest September on record. Also last October. Also last November. So we've known that those records are hitting. But then on the same day, NASA scientist Gavin Schmidt published an article in Nature explaining that the planet warmed 0.2 degrees Celsius more than scientists expected last year, and nobody knows why.
What do you mean they don't know why? What do you mean you don't know why? You're a scientist. If you don't know why, who does?
That's the crazy thing. It's not like they I guess it's that they still have to figure it out, but they've posed some explanations for why there might be some difference.
Okay.
But those explanations combined would explain less than 10% of the difference that we actually saw.
That is so fucked up.
Yeah. And 0.2 degrees Celsius as like a global average temperature over the course of 1 year.
It's death.
Is it is crazy.
Because we're trying to keep global temperature change below 1.5, right?
1.5, yes.
So a 0.2 degrees on 1.5?
Yeah.
That's insane.
It is crazy. It's like 15% of that difference. And the scary thing here, this is where it did like crumple my insides, because we've talked about how with climate change, it could send our Earth into a completely different state of equilibrium. There are these tipping points, right? And an example of one is a version of the Earth where the polar ice caps don't exist anymore. Thing is, if all of the polar ice melts, it's not going to refreeze. It's going to take millennia of a much colder Earth to reform the polar ice caps, right? And so when that happens, you're going to have not only massive sea level rise, but you don't even know what else is going to happen to the global ocean currents that regulate our climate.
The ocean currents are going to be so messed up.
Yes, and that affects our atmospheric currents as well.
Yes. If the atmospheric currents change, Europe is tundra. Right?
Yes.
Tundra, because it gets all of its heat from the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Gulf Stream, right?
Yep.
And so if cold water gets in the wrong places in that, all that gets messed up.
Yeah, it's like any kind of predictability we might have had over Earth,
Gone.
weather, climate, completely gone, right? Everywhere where we thought has been okay to grow food, we have no idea if that's okay anymore. The soil conditions, completely fucked up. So that's the scary thing about
that sigh.
about 0.2 degrees Celsius that is unexplained. Have we hit these tipping points?
Have we hit the tipping point? Is the tipping point the 0.2 thing that we can't explain?
Are we rolling over the edge right now? And that's what scientists will be continuing to collect data on to understand. And it's what is making it hard for me to sleep at night.
And this 0.2 degrees Celsius, this wasn't published in some lefty journal. It came from Nature.
It's Nature.
It's Nature.
It's the most pure scientific journal that exists.
Oh, dude, this is a nightmare. And let's just roll right into the next segment, okay? Because when all of this is going on and we're hitting these tipping points where we could all be dead in a couple decades or a couple years, we're talking about tailpipe emission standards.
Yes, because these are the types of battles that the political landscape makes it possible for us to fight right now. So new tailpipe emissions regulations came out from the EPA. And they were actually seen as relatively good for greenies, for environmentalists, right? It's going to require automakers to have over half of their new vehicles sold be fully electric or hybrid by 2032. So that sounds, again,
sounds great.
Compared to what we're currently at, that is great. We sold 9% of new vehicles were EVs last year, which is nothing.
Nothing.
Hilariously nothing. And it does, so it imposes this rule by lowering the average emissions limit for the automakers. The reason that it was seen as good also is because politically, entities like the UAW and the auto manufacturers, they have been fighting against these tailpipe emissions limits because they want to be able to keep selling gas-powered cars. And so Biden, who's now in an election year, but also wants to pass a rule that isn't going to get a ton of blowback from people all over the country, this is the best he could do, basically. This half measure. So
it's just great to see that we're talking about the destruction of the Gulf Stream, the destruction of the ice caps, and we're trying to figure out, can we still how much gas can we burn in our cars?
Yeah.
By a decade from now.
Exactly. This isn't happening for 8 years and we're already hitting these points. And of course, even this rule, to show the political backlash, this will immediately be challenged in court. Immediately. Red states are going to bring it. The Louisiana Attorney General has already said, the government can't do this. We're going to sue. We're going to take it to the Supreme Court, and they're going to be prevented from doing it.
Hey, Ben, guess what a court of appeals Louisiana is in? The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Yeah,
Classic.
exactly.
The most conservative court of appeals in the United States.
Yes, and the Supreme Court already has a history. A few years ago, they had a decision to restrict the EPA's power to regulate the vehicle or the auto industry. So it's automatically on the rocks. It is important that the administration is producing these regulations, and they need to produce more climate regulations fast. Because as long as their regulations are finalized 60 days before the end of a presidential term, they cannot be eliminated with a simple majority vote in Congress. So they're going to be racing to produce all of these before the election, basically. And I think they'll get them through.
That's
but
a
it's
lot
just something
of.
new.
We're going to see a lot of big Biden wins over the course of the next 4 months. Like a lot right now.
I guess, yeah, Biden wins political wins.
Probably not political wins.
Yeah, we'll see.
Right.
Right.
This is not a political win, but a policy win.
Yeah.
Right? They're not always the same thing.
Policy win in terms of passing something,
Yes.
at least. Yeah, something happening. You just don't know what the public response is going to be.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's...
Glad our hearts are in the right place, at least, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. Trying their best.
Fossil fuel subsidies in America have been a political nightmare to kill. Joe Biden and every other Democrat in the 2020 Democratic primaries ran on ending all fossil fuel subsidies from the federal government. Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Michael Bloomberg, all of them were running on calling for the end of all fossil fuel subsidies. But here we are, Joe Biden's president at 2024, and all of the subsidies are still there. In his 2025 budget, he is calling for the elimination finally. So in his budget, he's calling for the elimination of $35 billion in tax breaks that would otherwise be provided to the fossil fuel industry over the next decade.
So does this mean he hasn't even
He's proposed it. I'm sorry. He has proposed this in each of his budgets.
Okay.
Yes. So each one of his budgets, since he's been president, he has been proposing the elimination of these subsidies.
And never have they been able
Never have they been able to go through.
Classic.
Even when Democrats had the House and Senate. Keep that in mind.
That's crazy.
Right? So why? Because every single Republican opposes getting rid of these subsidies, and a handful of Democrats, notably Texas Democrat in the House, Henry Cuellar, and Joe Manchin in the Senate. But I want to put our frame of mind here. We are subsidizing the fossil fuel companies with $35 billion every single year at a time when our polar ice caps are melting, the Gulf Stream is getting totally messed up.
And also, I wouldn't even expect there to, do people really complain about energy costs in the U.S. that much? They're not usually, I guess
Gasoline,
the gas pump.
right?
Yeah. So that's I guess that's why.
I guess. But so we're pumping $35 billion into this industry that we all know needs to be eliminated over the next decade.
Yes.
I want to put $35 billion over a decade in perspective. The CHIPS Act was about $100 billion.
Yeah.
The CHIPS Act was the largest piece of U.S. industrial policy in 2 generations. And we're spending a third of that just on propping up the fossil fuel companies,
which are making record profits now.
It's an insanely wasteful. It's such a waste of money.
Yeah.
But this is why it's complicated. The truth is, these tax breaks have been built into the American economy for over a century. The first one was called the intangible drilling costs, and it was created all the way back in 1913 under Woodrow Wilson. That's how far back we're going to show this, okay? It allows companies to write off 80% of the costs of drilling. This includes employees' wages, survey work, the first year of operation, all before even producing a single drop of oil. They can write off 80% of their costs.
It's crazy. You think about a time when climate change wasn't a problem at all, and they were just like, oh, more oil. Yeah.
This was a great policy in 1913, right?
Yeah.
This was great industrial policy back in 1913.
Totally.
Now we're here 100 years later, and this is the reason our Earth is dying.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the intangible drilling cost subsidy. Now, there was another subsidy passed in 1926 called the depletion allowance subsidy. This allowed their oil companies to deduct taxable income by 27.5%.
That's so much.
That's so much. And it's such a specific number, right?
Yeah.
It's such it makes them think like, oh, wow, they really did their homework on that. They really came to that number in a very scientific way. Well, why is it 27.5? Optics. The answer is only optics. Senator Tom Connolly was a Texas Democrat who sponsored the tax break back in 1926, said it explicitly. He said we could have taken a 5 or 10% figure, but we grabbed 27.5% because we were not only hogs, but the odd figure made it appear as though it was scientifically arrived at.
I imagine this guy like sitting in an oil baron's mansion
Yes.
and like toasting his whiskey glass with them, being like, we're such hogs.
We're such hogs.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh, when he was a fat motherfucker. Oh my God. Okay. So that's Tom Connolly for you. This subsidy was eliminated for large producers in 1975, which was good. Good development, okay? But smaller companies are still allowed to deduct up to 15% of their revenue from their taxable income, which is still totally unacceptable. This is still costing the government a ton of money.
Billions.
Billions. How many billions? The oil and gas industry is expected to reap $1.7 billion in 2025 from the intangible drilling tax break alone, and $9.7 billion over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
$9.7 billion over 10 years. That is so much money. We always talk about needing to balance the budget. And then Republicans, how are we going to cut costs? Oh, let's cut food stamps. How about we just tax oil companies the rates that they should be taxed at?
Yeah. Imagine, like, let's put all of this money towards more food stamps.
Yes.
Like, fuck it.
Fuck it, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about $9.7 billion that's currently going to intangible drilling costs that is being spent on not even producing oil yet.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
The White House expects the oil companies to realize $880 million in benefits from the depletion allowance tax break in 2025 alone, and $15.6 billion by 2034.
Wow.
That's how much money we are giving to these oil companies. This is corporate welfare is what this is. This is socialism for the rich and hard capitalism for everyone else. That's what this is. Most
Bernie.
of this money isn't even going into building new infrastructure, which in terms of climate change is actually a good thing. But it's actually just being used. These companies are just buying their own stock.
Yeah, in terms of climate change is a good thing. In terms of a well-functioning economy, not so much.
In terms of an industrial policy, if you're going to throw these billions of dollars over a decade at any energy industry, why would it be the fossil fuel industry?
It makes
just
no sense.
take all of these subsidies and throw them to the green energy market.
Yeah.
There's no reason for it to do this to the fossil fuel companies.
No, we need to be doing the exact opposite. We need to be taxing the fossil fuel industry much higher and taking away all of their subsidies.
So who's even fighting for these tax breaks? Why are they so hard to get rid of? Well, oil lobbyists have spent $30 million since Biden took office to keep these things around, which if you're a lobbyist, $30 million is nothing if you're making $1.7 billion in 1 year.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, $30 million, $200 million. Who cares? I'll fucking throw anything as long as it's not greater than $1.7 billion.
Totally.
Right? So the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is also partnering with all these oil lobbyists, and they have spent $100 million annually lobbying for a wide range of issues, but they have explicitly cited the energy tax breaks as its imperative forefront attack against the Biden administration. Now, Senator Joe Manchin has been the strongest Democrat in the Senate in defending these subsidies, but there are some Democrats who are taking the right position. Bernie Sanders, he has said that we have a fiscal and moral responsibility to stop taxpayer dollars from padding the profits of an industry that is destroying our planet. Bernie, I'm glad you're our moral compass, but he's got no power.
He's not enough.
Not enough power. I'm glad someone is at least saying it.
Yeah.
I'm glad Joe Biden is putting it in his budgets every year. I'm glad this is where the conversation is at. But now we're past the time where it's where the conversation needs to be at. This is where the action needs to be.
Yes.
Right? We don't have the luxury to sit on our laurels and talk about how great these things would be and all these fantastic ideas. We need government of action right now, and we're not getting it.
No. Our government at this point we're so far from being built to act.
No.
It doesn't even exist for that. It feels like, and I do think that maybe we have a little bit of a shifting tide, almost like the pendulum has swung so far towards incompetence with the current House Republicans I think more political will is building to swing it back towards actually doing things.
Yeah.
But however fast they act will not be fast enough.
It will not be fast enough.
No.
To keep piling on this terrible news related to climate change, there is a new surge in power use across the United States that is threatening all of our climate goals. So since 2007, American energy consumption actually plateaued. Just flat energy demand from 2007 all the way to 2022.
Wow.
There just wasn't an increase. Well, why is this? The decrease in U.S.-based manufacturing. We didn't have to power these massive industrial plants, right? This is a whole transition of the economy where we just didn't have as many energy needs. Well, things are changing. Over the past year, electric utilities have nearly doubled their forecasts of how much additional power they'll need by 2028. Why is this happening? One, the growth of data centers. Data centers use a lot of energy. These things operate 24/7.
Yeah.
And they take a lot of power to run. In addition, there is an increase in U.S.-based manufacturing. Joe Biden has made it his priority to make things in America again with the CHIPS Act, with the Inflation Reduction Act, with the Made in America program, where the U.S. federal government is only buying goods made in the United States.
Yep.
These are things that are now increasing U.S.-based manufacturing. And there's a trade-off to this. And the trade-off is we need more energy to power everything. And we see growth rates in battery factories as one of the manufacturing elements that needs the most amount of energy to even do.
Yeah.
So we're in this terrible catch-22 situation where we're trying to build the green energy of the future, but we need fossil fuels to build it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it is a catch-22. And it's still, I think, the better path.
Alternative.
You need to get the infrastructure there so that all the building that you can do in the future, and there is research being done and development happening to make to electrify the means of constructing these battery plants and EV plants and things. But
the worry is we allow these companies to keep investing in fossil fuels, so they just get so embedded in fossil fuel production that they don't transition at all.
Exactly. The only way around something like this is almost to, like, if in the CHIPS Act and in the IRA, it was written in that, but you also have to build everything that we're allocating this money for with green energy.
Yeah.
Which would be, again, politically completely non-viable.
Right.
Never would happen.
Totally non-viable. Also, it might be technologically non-viable.
It is technologically, I mean, the combination of technology and the economy would make it impossible.
Yes.
Yes.
So peak demand for all this energy that's getting produced now or getting demanded on, peak demand in the summer is projected to grow by 38 megawatts nationwide.
38,000.
38,000, thank you, megawatts nationwide in the next 5 years. I don't know what that means, right? It's like adding another California to the U.S. energy grid. California. That is the state that uses energy the most.
I'm curious what percentage of U.S. energy was consumed by California.
Yeah, please look.
I'll figure it out.
That is how much we're adding onto our energy grid, okay? An unexpected projected growth. This is leading to a resurgence. What do we got?
California was accounted for actually less than I expected, about 5% of all U.S. utility scale energy.
Oh, all right. That is actually less than I thought.
Less than I thought. Still extremely
Still
significant.
crazy.
Yeah.
Less than I thought, though.
Yeah.
This is leading to a resurgence in fossil fuel plants, which is the exact opposite reaction that we want this to be having. Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia are all proposing to build dozens of power plants over the next 15 years that will all burn natural gas. Now,
I wonder if there could be a way to structure these markets so that we could pass the costs onto the builders of these data centers. These massive companies like Google, right, and Facebook that are pouring all of this capital and needing all of this data. But I can't think about it because that's not how electrical grids work, right? Like if the data center is attached to the electrical grid and a neighborhood nearby is attached to, or is plugged into an electrical grid, I don't know if there's a way to prioritize that the neighborhood gets that electricity instead of the data center.
it's
I
like no idea.
If blackouts happen for everything attached.
Right.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of thinking like data centers and all these other industries have to take the cost. But if we think about like the Inflation Reduction Act, right, you're building out all these battery centers. A lot of it is already subsidized by the federal government. And so there's going to be, and then we want to charge the company for these transitions, then that's honestly charging the U.S. taxpayer, which I'm not really against in theory.
I'm not sure what you mean because
like if a utility company is like, all right, I need to build a new power plant and I need it to be fossil fuel. And the federal government's like, nope, you can't do that. You need to pass, or you talk to the data center, and the data center is like or the IRA funded thing needs to fund the transition of your utility power plant to a green energy one. And if that green energy producer or manufacturer is already getting money from the federal government money is really just going to the transition for the utility company at the end of the day, right?
But I mean, that's kind of what we want.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because the federal government will take on some of the cost, but it will also, I mean, with this is how the IRA works in general, a lot of it will be taken on by the private data center developer.
Right. Yeah. Sure. But we're seeing a rise in natural gas demand or natural gas power plant construction, which isn't necessarily like the worst thing. It's not like it's coal, right? And I'm glad it's not coal. Except in Kansas, where one utility has postponed the retirement of a coal plant to help power a giant electric car battery factory.
Yeah.
Which is so oxymoronic.
Yes. I also will say recent research just came out, this isn't a current event or anything, that methane leaks at natural gas plants are actually probably way worse than was previously predicted.
Oh my
Could
God.
be up to like 3 times as bad as was previously predicted. So natural gas could still be worse than coal, but based on the difference in methane leakage, because methane is such a more potent natural or greenhouse gas than CO2, it might not even be that.
Well,
much
now
better.
with Biden has done a new thing with the EPA where they're regulating methane leaks for the first time, right?
Yes.
So is it possible that by regulating the methane leaks, natural gas could become much more safe?
Yes, it's possible if enforcement is good enough.
Right, if enforcement is good enough, obviously.
Yeah.
Experts have suggested if a wave of new gas-fired plants get approved by the state regulators, it is game over for Biden administration's 2035 decarbonization goal. That's it. If these power plants go through, it's done.
Yeah, and because once they go through, you're not shutting them down.
No, you're not shutting them down.
No.
Fossil fuel companies are blaming the lack of reliable renewable energy investments on long-term permitting processes, which they're not wrong. Data centers can be built in 1 year, okay? But it can take 5 years or longer in order to be able to connect renewable energy projects to the grid, and decades if you're trying to build these long-distance power line connectors.
Yes.
And a lot of that is because of the long permitting process that exists at the federal and a lot of state levels.
Totally.
Nationwide, only 251 miles of high-voltage transmission lines were completed last year. This number has been declining for over a decade. When the opposite needs to happen if we want to survive.
Yes, desperately. Like transmission, to be clear, we talk about this all the time as well, but it is our number one constraint as far as electrifying the grid or transitioning it to renewables. So the fact that number keeps going down because there's more and more red tape to transmit energy across state lines, it's killing us.
The fact that that's the hurdle is insane to me.
Yeah.
That's the hurdle. You're saying that we have a lot of the tech, we have all the money, but you're telling me that some NIMBY in the middle of Connecticut doesn't want to see a transition line through their backyard and it's stopping us from saving the planet?
Yeah.
That's where we're at? Get the fuck out of here.
It's terrible. I mean, this is happening. I don't know if you know, this is happening in New England, in Massachusetts, right? Maine has gotten in the way of us importing clean energy from Canada because apparently they don't want a transmission line going through their land, which why we don't know.
Unacceptable.
Yeah.
It's totally unacceptable.
It's crazy.
There's also an aspect to corporate greed with this. It's easier for these utility companies to make money off fossil fuels, but regulators need to be fighting back against this, and it looks like they're going to try to at least.
Yeah.
And this is when I say, hey, listen, I'm all for some bipartisanship, okay? Texas is the one state that is keeping up with demand across the country.
Yep.
And why is this? It's because Texas has streamlined their permitting processes. They are allowing wind, solar, and battery projects to get built and connected faster than almost anywhere else. And they have zoomed past California to lead the nation in large-scale solar production. So whatever Texas is doing in regards to this, Texas does a lot of things wrong. They do this right.
Yes.
And the rest of the federal government needs to learn from Texas right now and pass a permitting reform bill that's going to be able to get these green energy projects in the ground and connected to people's houses as fast as possible.
Totally. Absolutely.
We consistently talk about how one of the largest problems in the United States is that we're just not able to build anything. We are
maybe our biggest problem
that we're just the build nothing country.
Yep.
One example of this is we have EV stations, money that are supposed to go to EV stations. We're trying to build like 500,000 or something over the course of a decade. Last year we built 5.
Wow. Is that true?
Swear to God.
Oh my God.
Listen, it might take a while to build them. I don't know. But right now we've built 5.
Wow.
Yeah. So we need to start building shit. And one of the biggest hurdles to building stuff is permitting. It's really hard to build stuff because there are so many different permitting regulations that you need to do before you're able to build anything. And it's causing problems with green energy development, with manufacturing development, with getting money out of the CHIPS Act, building out the fabs that are necessary to build semiconductors. All of this is a big problem. Senator Joe Manchin, for all of his bad, and there is a lot, has been pushing for permitting reform since the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act. On Monday, Manchin told energy executives that legislation reforming infrastructure permitting will get done before the end of this legislative session. U.S. Senator Daniel Sullivan, he's from Alaska. He represents like the mining state of Alaska. Okay, very, very important to that state's economy. Also told the group that the nation needs to fashion a critical minerals development policy. This is good. We need a critical mineral development policy. This is specifically because they're needed for batteries and electric vehicles and the transition to green energy. We need all of these things. We need to get permitting done. Obviously, the political battle comes in how you get it done and the different intricacies on how this will work. So Democrats want the permitting process to be capped at 2 years max for all green energy related projects, while Republicans want the permitting process to be capped at 2 years for all energy types, green, fossil fuel, whatever it is, capped at 2 years for everything. Democrats are against that. Manchin sides with the Republicans on that one.
Yes, which makes sense because West Virginia is a big fossil fuel energy producer. This is so important, though, because when we talked earlier about new natural gas plants going into operation, we said these aren't going to shut down ever.
Right.
Once these are on, they're staying on. If we can have differences in the permitting processes for renewable energy generation and for fossil fuel energy generation, that's one of the very few places we can actually ensure that renewables takes a lead on fossil fuels.
Exactly. That's a great point. That's a great point. Republicans also want to, this is crazy to me, okay? Republicans, in part of any permitting deal, Republicans want to block any federal agency from thinking about climate change throughout the permitting process.
It is crazy.
What do they have, a death wish?
No, I'm assuming that like catastrophe is going to start getting bad enough that Republicans are scrambling, and then they start finding a way to blame Democrats for not handling climate change well enough. And the good thing will be by then there will be no argument for them to make against it, and they'll be like, okay, yes, let's pass all this stuff. The same way that it's like, yeah, let's pass let's subsidize semiconductor development because everyone is on the side of isolating ourselves or protecting ourselves from China, from China's economic warfare. But it's going to be so late in the game.
What scares me is I will always say the only thing more dangerous than a right winger who doesn't believe in climate change is a right winger who does believe in climate change. Because a right winger who does believe in climate change will say it's all the immigrants' fault, put machine guns at the borders, don't let anybody else in, it's all their fault.
Why?
They're the ones who are coming into this country, using up more energy, making it more hard. We need to keep all the resources for ourselves because everything's limited.
Okay.
So that's what scares me more than anything about a right winger. Because then you start getting into eco-fascism, and eco-fascism is that's a thing.
Okay.
That's a thing. There are eco-fascists in America, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I don't like that either.
No, so listen, if we can just have some moderate Republicans realize that this is in the interest of America, long-term economy, it is not really ideological at the end of the day. There's really nothing ideological going on about here because we're using private companies to do all this.
Yeah, I mean, it's ideological only in the way that science has become politically ideological.
Right. It's not like we're saying the U.S. government needs to come in and nationalize all the oil companies. We're not saying that.
No. Which, right? I mean, even though we have said that.
Which would be okay
we do believe it. That's not what we're saying right now.
That's not what Joe Biden is pushing for and who we're going to vote for.
No.
Right? But yeah, that's where Joe Manchin is on the permitting process. And I really hope something does get done within the next couple of years. Because if Joe Biden is president and permitting reform happens, that would be really great.
It would also be great if the permitting reform could apply to housing.
That would be huge.
That would be enormous.
If permitting reform happens and then Donald Trump becomes president, we're fucked.
Yes.
Right? So high risk, high reward, but the high reward I think is worth it.
It is. It's the only way.
It's the only way.
A few days ago, a new national security law was passed in Hong Kong. it's designed to crack down on internal dissent against the Chinese government in Beijing. It includes 39 new national security crimes, and its measures include establishing penalties like life imprisonment for treason and insurrection. It targets offenses like external interference and theft of state secrets. And so this is a big deal because Hong Kong is an international business center. When you're broadly targeting something like theft of state secrets, and you understand how much China's government wants to have a stranglehold on the information that gets out of the country, you're going to concern these banks and these consulting companies on accurately communicating what's going on in Hong Kong and in China to its international counterparts and customers. So, according to CNN, the language of the law defines a state secret as information concerning the construction of national defense and diplomatic or foreign affair activities of China to any major policy decision on affairs and the, quote, economic or social development of both Beijing and Hong Kong. I said a lot of words there. Basically, it means everything. Any kind of information about China that they have, the economic or social development, that means like, yeah, how is the economy? If they want to accurately report on it and they maybe have different ideas of what the numbers are than what the Chinese government is producing, and the Chinese government is known to produce inaccurate statistics all the time to make themselves look stronger, they're not allowed to do that. Or if they do, they're threatened with jail time. So I got interested in the historical context here because Hong Kong for a long time has been this gateway to China, where obviously it borders China. It's historically been part of China since before the 19th century. They have a lot of really close connections to Chinese businesses, but it's also been kind of a safe haven for Western culture and ideology in a lot of ways that has attracted a lot of people to it. So in the 1840s, Hong Kong became a territory of the United Kingdom after the Opium Wars. But then in the 1970s, a whole movement towards decolonization was happening, and Deng Xiaoping, who was the leader of China at the time, was like, we need Hong Kong. Hong Kong is obviously Chinese territory. We need sovereignty of it. But Margaret Thatcher, who was the leader of Britain, was like, we signed these treaties and there's nothing to say they shouldn't stand, so we're going to have to negotiate it to figure out what's going to happen to Hong Kong. We're not just going to give it to you for free. So what happens is right before negotiations start, China passes an amendment to its constitution to allow for special administrative regions, which would have a high degree of autonomy. Basically, it means the special administrative regions are almost their own country, with the exceptions of getting defense from the Chinese military and being diplomatically represented by China in some international diplomacy. So after the negotiations, the Brits were like, okay, if you give Hong Kong this much autonomy, we're fine with you having it. So China gets technical authority over Hong Kong as a special administrative region, but Hong Kong still maintains its own legislature. It's allowed to be free market capitalist, even though the rest of China is communist. It gets its own currency, its own legal system, its own police forces, its own immigration policies. In almost every way, it's its own country. And because of that, it maintains a lot of freedoms as far as freedom of speech, freedom of the press. It's a democracy, whereas China quickly devolves into autocracy. In 1997, Hong Kong becomes fully back under control of China, and instantly they're thinking that they want to introduce laws like this. They want to bring Hong Kong to heel, bring it in line with the overall Chinese narrative that's going out to the rest of the world. So in 2003, they're looking to introduce these types of laws, but there are massive protests. Hundreds of thousands of people in Hong Kong take to the streets. And the authorities get scared. They back down because they think they're going too far and they think they might lose control, get overthrown. So they delay. And then they wait for over a decade until about 2019 when this comes back into the conversation. And again, massive protests. Yeah. Big protests for women's rights are happening. And so again, the legislature backs down. But in this time, 2019 and beyond, like Xi Jinping had been consolidating more and more power as the Chinese dictator. So by 2020, the Hong Kong legislature and their leader they're working for Xi. And so they're looking for opportunities to pass these laws to make Xi happy. And in 2020, they passed the first version of the national securities laws. These are largely seen to have brought Hong Kong further to heel under Beijing. Since then, Hong Kong hasn't really been viewed as an independent country, which it had been before that. So now this law goes even further, fills in any of the gaps that might have existed in 2020. I don't want to go too far. So what I actually think this will do is I think it will have effect on the margins for companies operating in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. There are still economic benefits there, right? Hong Kong taxes are much lower. It is still a capitalist free market economy as opposed to China's. And it still does have its connections to China. But this means that Hong Kong is no longer a safe haven that companies can operate in, as opposed to China, where the government will come and make a billionaire leader disappear for months. That can happen in Hong Kong now. So that safety is no longer there. I don't think that's going to change a ton of business activity because they're still just going to be making these decisions in terms of dollars and cents.
Yeah. I mean, I will say it seems to go against the Chinese goal over the last year here, where they've been really trying to massage international investors and make them feel comfortable about coming into China again, right?
Yeah.
Like they went to Davos, they went to San Francisco in the United States. They've been really trying to lead these business leaders back into China and make them feel like it's okay. This goes against that.
Yeah, I will say, I think even in that time, China has been saying one thing and doing another.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They want to convince these business leaders that it's okay. And the thing is, the business leaders want to believe them.
They want it to be okay so bad.
Yes.
They so badly want it to be okay.
Yeah, but it's just not.
It's just not.
For that reason, I think it's a smart move by Xi. What it doesn't do to businesses, I think it will have maybe more of an effect on the people living in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
They've seen themselves as more aligned with the West, values-wise, right? And so these people now are going to, even if their freedom of thought can still be there, their freedom of speech has been significantly lessened.
Significantly.
And that is going to bother people. I think it's going to make it a less attractive destination for talent.
Definitely.
Although it'll still be attractive to people in China, right? It'll still be an upgrade for people in China that want more freedoms and coming to Hong Kong.
That's fair.
So we'll see. I think it's one of those things. It's one of those policies that is going to be upstream of people's behavior further down the road. It's going to be like, okay, now if someone's trying to leave China, more of them are going to start deciding to go to Canada rather than Hong Kong.
Yes, going to Canada, coming to the United States. It's going to act on the brain drain too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's an interesting, it's a clear geopolitical move that's been happening. Like, right, we can check this off in terms of this is China grabbing a little bit more power over another territory.
Yeah. Deep dive time. Well, shallow dive. We really just want to go over what capital gains taxes are. So one of the things that we always hear about in the United States is how rich people don't get taxed the right percentage or the fair percentage. They don't pay their fair share. And we kind of want to talk about why they don't pay their fair share. We always hear why does Elon Musk pay less in taxes than the average school teacher? Well, capital gains taxes is one of the reasons why.
Yeah.
And we kind of want to go through the history of the capital gains tax, what it means, the current rates, and kind of discuss why it even exists in the first place. Mm-hmm. So the capital gains tax was first made back in 1907, and originally the short-term rate for capital gains tax and the long-term rate were taxed the same. Well, what does that mean? So short-term means any trades made in a 2-year time span, that's short-term.
Right now it's 1 year.
Right now it's 1 year.
So
okay.
So a capital gain is a profit made from the sale of an asset. So basically this means if you buy an asset today and you sell it in 364 days or any time before that, that's a short-term capital gain, that profit that you make. If you buy it today and you hold it for longer than that and then sell it, it's a long-term capital gain.
Thank you. That was a great explanation. So with the short-term capital gains and the long-term capital gains being taxed at the same rate back in the day, that was making it some very bad behavior because they put the capital gains rate lower than labor income. Why would you do that? Well, they wanted to encourage investment. They wanted to encourage more people putting money into the market. And to do that, they thought, we'll make the capital gains rate lower than the labor rate. Well, what that encouraged people to do was speculate a lot and do a lot of speculation. So these short-term capital gains was getting taxed at very, very low rates and encouraging all the speculation. It was actually very, very bad for market volatility.
Yes.
And regulators and policymakers needed to change this. So they split it in the 20s for a long-term capital gains rate and a short-term capital gains rate. So as Ben was saying, your capital gains rate for the one-year trades were the same as your labor income. Yep. Your capital gains for a long-term trade was no longer your labor income. And the number has fluctuated throughout the years. Sometimes the percentage has been all the way up at 40 back in the 1970s. Sometimes it's been all the way down to where it is now at 15 or something, right? So it's been going up and down. The highest amount of effective tax that was paid was actually started under Ronald Reagan, which I didn't expect. In 1986, the Democrats controlled the House. I'm pretty sure they controlled the Senate. And they passed a bipartisan bill with Ronald Reagan at the time that increased the capital gains rate for long-term and short-term capital gains taxes. Okay. And that kept all the way up until the Clinton administration. And then halfway through the Clinton administration, the Republicans took the House, and then they passed a bipartisan bill to cut it. So Clinton worked with the Republicans to cut the capital gains rate. Okay. Now, capital gains taxes were actually something that were pretty prominent during the 2016 presidential election. Donald Trump actually would attack Hillary Clinton for not taxing capital gains at the same rate as labor income back during the debates. And he would attack things like the carried interest loophole. Yeah. And
which is a good thing to attack.
Yeah, it's a great thing to attack because the truth is Hillary Clinton helped write a lot of these tax documents that we're complaining about right now. So very effective rhetoric, but when Trump gets into office, he does not make good on any of his rhetoric. No. And currently our capital gains tax rates are as low as they've ever been. So where are they at now?
Right now, short term, still at the level of labor income. Long term, 0% on capital gains if you make less than $45,000 a year, 15% for $45,000 all the way up to $554,000, and then 20% on everything over $554,000. Yeah. Which is much lower than you would pay on labor.
Much lower than you pay on labor. If it was paid on labor, we'd be talking about 37%.
At the top income bracket.
Yeah, but the top income bracket for this long-term capital gains is only 20%.
Yeah.
So here's the problem with this. Is it good policy?
Good or bad is
good or bad policy is the question. Now, for short term, I think we both agree, should be taxed the same as labor, maybe more.
Yeah, probably more.
Right. I think we really want to discourage speculation.
Yes, speculation doesn't help.
We want people to invest their money in a reasonable way, thinking about long-term growth.
Yeah, because speculation, what it tends to do is it helps gamer traders. Right, who are not intending to actually invest in companies developing in a way that they think will help the economy. Right? It's just, how can I follow or predict human sentiment well enough to make a quick buck?
Yes, that's exactly right.
And if it's not that, if it's someone gambling otherwise, then it's dangerous to the investor, right? Then you kind of want to discourage them from thinking they can make big profits if they're less informed about it, because they can lose a lot of money.
Yeah.
So short term, I would say higher than labor income. Long term, it is good to have long-term investment in companies. I was thinking about this, and I might be okay with long-term rates being below labor income. Because what I'm thinking about is the income that you make from your labor, those dollars are going to go to say goods or services that are mostly just going to contribute directly to the profit margin of a company. They aren't going to be as instrumental in building out infrastructure or new technology development that companies look to raise money from equity from.
Right.
Whereas long-term investment might actually be dollars that are more useful for those higher value added activities that happen in the economy. Do you think that makes any sense?
I think that makes sense. I think I definitely want to encourage long-term investment, right? My thing that we've talked about before offline is, does this effectively do that? Does this encourage long-term investment, or would they long-term invest anyway?
True.
Right? Would these guys, because if we think about it, like you said, this is passive income.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is passive income, who cares if you're getting 20% taxed or 35% taxed? If it's passive income, you're not doing anything for it anyway.
Yeah, you're still going to want the passive income.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not like you have another alternative.
I guess that's the question.
There's nowhere to really go.
Are we missing other alternatives that
Yeah.
they might choose? I don't know.
I mean, like, then I mean,
Bonds or...
no, but even then, it's
Because it will never match the rates that you're getting.
No, it'll never match the rate that you're getting here. So there's really no way for other place for them to go unless they go to like an international market. Unless they decide,
Sure.
But they're still going to get taxed in the U.S. if they're U.S. citizens.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So there's probably at least room to move these rates up.
Yeah.
Even if they can't go to 100%.
No, of course.
Right. But they can. But 20 is probably lower than you need to have it to make sure you're not discouraging.
I like the idea of having 0% for lower incomes generated,
because you want lower income people to get in the wealth building business.
Yes, exactly. I want people to be encouraged to start long-term investing.
Okay.
So I like that process.
Okay.
But Joe Biden is recently pushing for an increase in the capital gains tax rate by making another bracket over $1 million and then putting that tax at 37% for over $1 million.
Okay.
Which is the best compromise.
Yes.
Right? If you're not going to make the 500,000 to 1 million be 37%, at least make $1 million up be 37.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that, definitely. But I also understand not making it too much, even for like a 500,000 number, because you're talking about a long-term capital gain, right? So like you're talking about a person who's made a long-term investment. I almost start to take the side of like rewarding them for staying in the market long, making $1 million off of staying in the market long enough to get that. Yeah.
That's why it's important to invest in a Roth IRA. If you are a youngin right now, if you invest in a Roth IRA, you won't pay capital gains taxes when you retire.
Yep.
All your money is pre-tax and you take it all out and it's not even considered income. Just the way to go.
Totally.
Yeah, that's the history of the capital gains tax. Pretty cool stuff. Awesome. Maybe we'll do a little more of these little deep dives about different tax regulations.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.